imagined before. So welcome to actually day number 2, but for all intents and purposes we're really at the start of the NLP Practitioner training. And this is Saturday, it's April, what is it, 16, 2011. Got to keep up with those details. So we did a little homework, and with regard to the NLP definition or introduction to NLP, more likely, then so tell me what you picked up out of your reading. What's something you either learned, picked up, or understood from it? Jenny?
I was just thinking when I first started reading it that this one.
Okay, yeah, there's a good one. And go back to a specific moment, put yourself in it. I know it's early in the morning already, so put yourself in it and let your body be in that moment. Let your body and your mind be in that moment where you're seeing what you see, hearing what you hear now, and feeling the way you felt then, tactile sensation, air on your face, smells, tastes, all of that. As you put yourself in that state, take a deep breath. Let yourself breathe the way you would have been breathing in that moment. Sit the way you'd be sitting even if you weren't sitting at that moment, and let yourself have the state of being in a learning state, and let yourself do that. So then you think, well, there are moments when you're going to be confused. Now, you could stay confused, but that's actually a really good thing, because every time you get confused, you should get really excited about it, because you can get right back to excited, put yourself back in the state. 1, 2, 3, snap your fingers. Yes, 1, 2, 3, do it again. This time do it like 5 times more intensely. Let it come from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. 1, 2, 3, now. So let yourself be excited instead of confused, because you think about what confusion is. It's what happens right before you learn, isn't it? I don't know how you were in school, but sometimes I would study and cram and work at it, and the more confused I got, the harder it seemed, and then suddenly it would kind of all open up for me. And you probably have some sort of experience like that, and I invite you to let yourself be in those kinds of states during this training. And we're going to play around with states a lot so that you get the experience of mastering your states anywhere, anytime, no matter what the circumstance. So a little bit about states. So what else about the reading you got? Go ahead.
I actually got about 3 things. One of the things that I thought was stood out to me is like what NLP is about is how to unpack it and repackage behavior.
Yeah.
And then I liked where it made a distinction between macro behavior and micro behavior. I thought that was interesting.
Say a little more about that. So what's a macro behavior?
Well, it says here the macro behavior is overt and easily observable, as in driving a car, speaking, fighting, eating, getting sick, or riding a bicycle. Whereas the micro behavior involves very subtle, though equally important phenomena, such as your heart rate, the tempo of your voice, skin color changes, pupil dilation, or even seeing from the mind's eye or having an internal dialogue.
Excellent. And one of the things we're going to do is have you actually shift the way you normally experience things and pay attention to some of that more micro behavior. What'd you learn or pick out of it?
I was definitely like Jenny. A lot of the terminology was confusing, and I found myself reading it over and over again because I was missing something.
Yeah.
But it was exciting because based on what you said yesterday, it gives me more. I think it's just that the unknown of the adventure that we're going to go through this process. So I was very excited about it.
And it doesn't tell you what the experience is going to be.
No. It's intrigue. Yeah.
And it's a description about it, so it's a meta document about NLP. Alec?
Oh.
Andrew?
I like the idea of NLP, of building a model, because models have wide application.
Yeah.
And what I really like about it is that hopefully we're going to develop specific tools to put into that model that are going to help us effectively communicate with other individuals.
Yeah. So that affects everything. So you got the key from here to out there. Excellent. Anything else? Anything you picked up? Lydia?
Well, the piece about, you're not gonna go into theory, and it's
Okay.
just the doing, and when I read that, I went, oh,
Oh,
okay, let go of
yeah.
that, let go of that, because I'm so used to in being in university saying, what's the theory?
Yeah.
And all that. And I said, okay, trust the process. I remember you said, trust the process.
Yeah, especially out of that university background. Even psychology and all those, they're based on a theory or two. And NLP is really just a set of tools. I mean, we found stuff that seemed to work, and we pulled it in. It became NLP then. So, more about that. Something you picked up?
Well, this will be my second time through this practitioner course, and so the things that I've learned about it, that this chapter had was about magic and illusion. And the first time I went through it, I didn't understand if I didn't really have something Bill was talking about. I needed to use my imagination. And so I was so analytical about everything that it was so hard for me the first time. And then as I went to more and more, I understood about illusion, I understood about magic, I understood about all of the other things. So, that's
Yeah,
what
and if
I
you've been
learned
looking
about
at titles of books around NLP, a lot of the early books were The Structure of Magic 1 and 2. A lot of magic titles. So what is it about magic? Part of the point I was making yesterday about, in the beginning was the word, and how we started with everything, that something, if you think about magical incantations, they were linguistic forms. I guess they still are. I don't really follow that particular avenue of practice, but the people who are still doing that kind of work are using linguistic. In fact, it's probably true that we all do it in one way or another. And it's not all just the words of it. Have you ever read the stuff about manifestation? I put a picture of a car that I wanted to have, and I wanted to have it. I thought in 6 months I could have this car and be driving it, so I put it up inside the car where I could see every day the car that I wanted to have instead. In about 6 weeks, I was driving it. I thought, whoa, this is pretty amazing stuff. It was almost a little scary how quickly it happened. But a kind of way of thinking about it, it's a little bit like magic how things happen. When you begin to sort for certain things, you ever have the experience that you got a new car? Speaking of cars, where you didn't really think there were that many of those cars on the street.
Actually, you got one. When they're all over.
Now you're sorting for that particular car, and it's everywhere. Everywhere. So you begin to notice things. It's what you sort for that creates your reality.
Rhonda did something like that, and it really was effective.
Yeah.
She went on a weight reduction diet,
Mm-hmm.
and she took a model, kind of a body that she wanted, and she superimposed her head on it,
Okay.
and she put it like on her computer where she
There you
could
go.
see it constantly.
Excellent.
And my sense of that was, and she takes it where she goes.
I have a little paper doll bookmark of it too.
Yeah.
Because there's this, the hardest part about dieting sometimes is that discipline.
Yeah.
But if you have that constant reminder there, it gets you over that hump.
Well, I try to get people in my weight program to actually keep that picture in their minds, but having the physical manifestation of it right there is really excellent, because it's not that easy for people to keep that image, because it's not already in their psyche.
It was funny because it took me 3 days to see my head on that body. For 3 days I kept seeing the model's head on that body.
Right.
Truly.
Yeah.
It took that long for it to actually go, yeah, that looks like
Okay.
me.
Now your
And Rhonda
unconscious
did-
mind is beginning to say,
Rhonda
okay,
did something I thought very
I'll help you
smart.
create it.
She had her makeup, her hair was like done well,
Yeah.
and so she looks very attractive.
Yes.
On top of it all, so
Yeah.
it's a double reinforcement.
Yeah. Pretty smart. Good idea. Who's next?
I am. Just the fact that you can modify or change your behavior
Mm-hmm.
with using this technique, I thought that was quite amazing. For me,
Yeah.
because there's so many people out there that believe that, that this is the way their life is going
Yeah.
to be, and they've just accepted being unhappy
Yeah.
or
And
trudging through each day.
most people don't
without
make that
change.
much change in their life once they get kind of set in the way they are.
Right.
So yeah, that we're changing all the time. Thanks.
I'm trying to remember what I read.
Okay, yeah.
And and that is because it seems like when I read it, there was a lot of new terms, like it seemed like a lot of modeling was gonna be in there, shaping, shifting, consciousness, nonverbal, communication. Seemed like a lot of psychology terms, but also wasn't really nailing anything down. It was kind of like an advertisement, like pulling you in, like I can't wait to know, how are we gonna do all this?
How are we gonna do all that, yeah.
So it's almost like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, here's all the benefits, I'm like, okay, or features, and of this product. And I can't wait to learn more about it. So there's a lot of key terms that stuck out, patterns, this and that, but I'm still waiting to learn how we're gonna get there. But
it's like software. I understand there are people who actually read the manuals and all of that first. I can't imagine doing that. I gotta jump in and get started with it.
But then after hearing everyone else discussing, and you're talking about magic and all this, so maybe it's one of those things where it's not really, maybe it's not the same for everybody. Maybe there's a guideline, and you can go in different directions with it.
Yep.
So I'm just kind of learning more of what it's all
So
about.
good news is it's opening up a lot of files for you.
A lot of questions. It's
Yeah,
like more
questions are best. Yeah.
Mhm.
Emily?
Marsha was the first to say mine. Mine was, I really love the part. Neurolinguistic programming is a model about the world of magic and illusion represented by human behavior and communication. See, growing up, I loved fantasy.
Yeah.
Loved it. My mom was always like, that's impossible, that's possible, that's impossible. But the idea of magic and illusion coming to life, it had to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So I really love that line. And then NLP is about just how to unpack and repackage behavior. See, I don't like change. I'm a Taurus, but maybe it's more than that. I don't like change. So maybe that's what also caught me off guard in the last time I tried to take the course. Is, I'm kind of set in my own behavior, so it's just
Think you are a certain way.
open up, the idea that, there can be change.
All right, excellent, thank you. Andy?
It was a nice overview of, what NLP entails, and it was really an eye-opener for me in the sense that there's so much more to this, and I basically had the impression that there might be maybe 5 or 6 different techniques, such as mirroring, pacing, anchoring, and a few others. So there's a whole, this is a lot more, involved, and certainly an opportunity to learn a lot of different aspects of it, aside from various applications, but different ways that it can be beneficial to yourself in situations in general.
Good, thanks. Broader than you thought.
Yeah, people are not their behaviors.
Uh-huh.
You see someone act in a certain way, doesn't mean that's the way they are.
Right.
And it just keeps coming back for me, and I think this is one of the probably greatest things I've gotten out of it, because in my mind it's always been that, if a person acts that way, that means he's that way. There's always something behind it.
Yeah.
There's always something causing that person to act that way.
When you can separate the behavior from the person, then you keep the person intact.
Absolutely, and then if you actually get to the bottom of what's causing that behavior, the person appreciates the fact that you actually took the time and effort to look into why that person is doing that specific thing.
Excellent. Tom?
I really enjoyed actually learning a little bit more about the basic definitions of the jargon of NLP.
Okay, yeah.
But I got really excited when I read about illusions and magic and the possibility of creating that.
Okay,
Not
good.
just
Well,
learning
that
about
stood
it.
out for a few people, didn't it? Okay, excellent. So we're in this first chapter, and it's good to have this number of people, because almost everybody had a slightly different point that stood out to them, or that you could at least pick to speak about. And there's something really important, and it's actually part of the training, to speak about it, to get it out, and it causes you to encode the information in a different way every time you speak about it. And it's part of the debriefing of everything we're doing, because it causes it to go deeper when you do it. So we want to keep that process up. There's a thing about accelerated learning. So let's start now. And at the beginning of every chapter, you're going to find a page like page 2 in chapter 1. It says learning how to learn, which is the subject of this chapter. And then it says number 1 is a definition, knowing only what you know now. Now, here's the thing. There's in the 1950s, I think it's 1955, there's a guy named Nichols who does a study inside the field of education. And what his study says basically is that by the time somebody speaks, they can speak how many words a minute? Could be up to 200 to 300 words. Now, you think that's talking really fast, but your ears, what you can actually hear, is on an order of 30 times faster than that. So by the time I'm halfway through a sentence, you already think you know where that sentence is going. You think about when you were a kid in class and you already were there, what happens to your little brain? Well, you want to go somewhere else because you already know where that sentence is going. You get impatient, you get bored, and your mind wanders. So now you're off on some other fantasy that kids are often on, and the teacher actually either took a right turn, went somewhere else, or finished that topic and went on to another one, and you come back to the conversation, you have no clue where you were, where the conversation was, so you've missed something in the learning. So you think, well, what is it then? Because we all have this tendency to let our minds wander, and you got to bring it back, and yet it's possible to be so, there are moments when you're so excited about something that your attention's kind of, even if it does go off, it's right back. You're able to follow through and get all the information out of it. What's different in those circumstances than the ones where you let your mind wander? What do you think? And you don't have to actually answer specifically, just let yourself be aware of the kinds of thoughts you're having about it. What I'm going to suggest is that accelerated learning, a big piece of this is, well, how do you keep the attention? How do you be in the state of excellent learning? And one idea is that where you would otherwise be wandering in your mind, I'm going to have you ask 3 questions. The first one is, if you were to write, actually that would be the answer to number 2. On the first one, do this too. Take a moment and write, knowing only what you know now, what would be a definition of accelerated learning. Now, you may notice that accelerated learning is not spelled with an ACCELERATED. It's copyrighted misspelling. So the basic concept is accelerated learning. So what do you think that is? Take a moment and write that, and then go right into number 2 and write 3 questions that you expect to be answered in the study about accelerated learning. With regard especially to the 3, well, first of all, what definition did you come up with?
The ability to process information faster and receive the message from a different aspect or more effectively.
Okay, good. Kind of incorporated a lot of parts of it. You got one?
I'd put accelerated learning as learning in an excellent way that may not make logical sense, but is organized in such a way as to be picked up and stored in your subconscious.
Ooh, I like that. We'll get one more.
I came up with being able to learn new concepts in a new and different manner.
Okay. Good. All of these definitions are going to be good definitions. So you may actually hear something from somebody else you want to put on your page too, so just try to mark it and come back to it. With regard to the 3 questions, what's one of the, just give me one question you thought of that would be something you'd like to have answered.
Can I apply this to other learning situations?
Can I apply it to other learning situations? What's another question?
What is the retention period for what I learned?
Retention period, excellent. One more?
Why haven't I learned this before?
Yeah, well, that's a good enough question. There's not any bad questions. One of your questions?
Well, one of my questions I put, how will I challenge myself?
Okay, good. So let's come back to this. What do you suppose the value of that is in terms of your mind wanders from time to time? What's the value of having these questions?
To refocus you.
It'll cause you to refocus, and what specifically about it causes you to refocus?
Well, because you change up what you're doing, you're changing your state by asking yourself another question.
Okay. Another idea?
I think it also helps you become more of an active listener.
And how so? You become an active listener in what way?
Because I think sometimes you have a tendency, or I have a tendency to listen. I think I know what the person's saying before I really hear what they're saying to me.
Right.
So
Okay.
how I take the information in can be.
There's also a piece of this that the way we tend to take it on is very reactive. And what you've just done is taken a step in the direction of becoming very proactive about your own learning. Now, even more importantly than that, what just happened to your attention? As I begin to continue to teach about and lecture about the chapter on accelerated learning, how's your attention now different than it would have been without this?
To me, it's about being in the present.
How you get in the
Just think
present.
right at the moment and absorb, not thinking about what did we talk about a little bit ago,
Yep.
what's coming in the future, or other stuff going on in our minds. And
Okay.
we really do have to get in the present.
Good. Liddy?
In the present, but active, I guess.
But
because
active.
It's how you're coding what you're taking in. Are
It's
you
how-
doing
yeah.
something, working in your brain, exercising your brain while you're
Yeah.
listening in the present?
Yeah, and we're kind of getting all around this, and you begin to think about, well, your attention just shifted dramatically in that you're expecting something to occur. Now, what happens because you're expecting it?
It happens.
Yeah. Well, it may happen and it may not, but where's your attention gone? Because I may cover exactly what your question is, and I may not. But in the meantime, your attention is waiting, anticipating, going to get that bit of information, and you pick up all the other stuff that went along with it because your attention is different than it would be if you had been in a reactive kind of mode with it. Does that make sense? So, beginning piece of what is accelerated learning. How do we, it's a little bit of a trick our brains into being in a moment of learning. So we want to get more and more about what are learning states. Anything else?
I come up with a heightened awareness of our mind wandering and more focus and control over it.
Yeah, and just that you're now aware that your mind wanders, because problem is most people never think of it. Never occurs to us. It's transparent, kind of unconscious in the way we experience it. Number 3, how is it useful to learn what you're going to learn about accelerated learning? How do you think that learning about this will be important and useful? What, when, where, why, how, with whom, by when are really great questions to be asking all the time anyway. And it begins to, well, okay, there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of data. How am I going to put it into use for myself? And these questions are going to take you in the direction of that. So there's often going to be a page that will have something about how can I make this a ritual? How can I implement it in such a way that it'll become part of my life? Because that's what you're going for here. Even with Tony Robbins, people would come back from those trainings and go, well, I got all this stuff, I was really excited, but then I didn't use it very much and some of it started falling away. Well, what I'm going to tell you is the people who start practicing now, get the habit in place while you're in the class, and then continue to pick things to work on, practice on. When I got back from practitioner training, number 1, I just started asking anybody I knew. I would work with you for free. If you got some problem issue that I can work on. And the people who said yes, I would just do these little patterns, step by step by step. I'd put the page in front of me where I could see it, pull it out of the manual, and I would do it exactly the way it was on the paper, and it always worked. I was just fascinated because, it could have been a fluke the first 2 times or 3 times I did it, or 5 times or 6 times even. And eventually I began to get some confidence about this. This stuff works. And then I started getting to where I had the patterns in place where I didn't have to do it. And you begin to find then that, oh, this pattern, I'm in the middle of this pattern, but something just happened that caused me to go use this pattern. So you get really elegant in the way you combine things, use them in different ways. For now, learn the individual pattern first. So this is like the Karate Kid movie. Remember, wax on, wax off? Yeah. Miyagi comes and tests him at the end. He's got all the skills in place, and they operate so unconsciously for him, he doesn't ever have a chance to think about what the responses are. They're already integrated. So what you're getting is wax on, wax off with the training, and we're putting it in a particular order so that it builds on itself. Now, lots of NLP skills can be learned individually, and they're really useful. You can use them in your daily life. learning it this way, the practitioner training in particular is geared to have you build on your skills so that they multiply and go geometric with it. So you'll notice that there's actually a difference in the way your processing begins to expand as we get through it. So some of the answers to the questions that were on the previous page are on the next page. I didn't tell you that. So learning is a process. Why don't you read the...
Learning is automatic. Learning is the process of association. Learning is state related. Learning is a function of distinctions of difference.
Yeah. And as we go, we'll get more and more distinctions about these particular pieces. And the process of learning outcome would be, and why don't we just read one at a time, go around.
Okay. The ability to consistently organize perceptual filters in order to make effective use of input for evaluations now and in the future, thereby enhancing the ability to achieve desired outcomes.
Yeah. Anybody got an idea what that means? Kind of like the definition we...
Right,
the
it's an assimilation of what's going on, an organization of it, and then it's being able to put it into a practical action.
Okay, good. I like that. Next, Jenny.
To enrich the internal maps of each individual by adding a series of neurological choices for learning state manipulation.
Yeah, that kind of fits with everything we've been saying so far, right? Andrew?
3, to experience the difference between effective organization of perceptual, 5 senses, storage, and random storage.
So there's something that would be random storage, there's something that would be perceptual storage. So getting what those distinctions might be, or differences might be. And number 4.
Have fun and create more ecstasy.
Okay, would you be responsible for that one for us?
Okay.
It's not.
Ready to go.
Okay. 4, page 4. Learning is state related, so things like relaxation, using your body, perception, using your mind, memory, imagination, encoding and recall, belief. And we're going to play a lot with belief and values. And the whole idea of accelerated learning, of NLP in general, is starting with the idea of perception. So if you turn the page real quickly and just take a look, what is that? No,
Rabbit.
It's a rabbit,
Or a duck.
and it's a duck. And which did you get first?
The duck.
Some of you got duck, some of you got rabbit. And what did you have to do to get the other one? Some people took a little longer to get it than others. Now you get it.
Yeah.
And if it didn't have the words on there, you might not have thought to look for something else in it. And if we didn't talk about it. So you notice that once you get it a certain way, there is a tendency to keep getting it that way. It gets a little harder to look at it from a different perspective as soon as you got it one way. And most things are like that. So you get the vases and the faces. And I've got lots of these things, which brings us to mind mapping. So we want to get the pieces in place that are going to expand your learning much more quickly. So this is just an open conversation on a topic, and who knows the rules of brainstorming?
There are none, just be respectful to other people. There's no right or wrong.
I like that answer, and especially the no right or wrong part. Who else has an idea about what makes brainstorming work better?
Everybody participates.
Okay, what else?
First thing that comes to your mind.
First thing that comes to your mind. Yeah, so it's a free association. It's much more lateral thinking than it is vertical thinking. And no reasons why not. Is that what you're going to say?
No, I was just gonna say, be creative and don't judge, just keep letting
Yeah.
the ideas flow.
And the don't judge part fits with the second part. So no reasons why not. So just kind of open mind. If I make this symbol on the board and I say it's a paper clip, what is the first thought that comes to mind about paperclip?
Paper.
Okay, could be related to paper somehow.
Holds things together.
Holds together.
Made of metal.
Shiny.
Okay, and I'm going to change colors. Metal,
Fake braces.
shiny.
In 3rd grade, they used to use them as fake braces.
Fake braces. That's one I haven't.
Everybody used to take a picture.
There's a creative use of the
Holds Christmas ornaments on your tree.
ornament holder.
They have multicolored ones now too. They're vinyl covered multicolored ones.
Okay, what else?
Different sizes.
Now, sizes is like a category. Now, ornament holder, you said there were
Multicolor.
multicolor.
Actually, a lot of people use them to fix their glasses too, or things like that.
Okay,
too.
there's another one of those fake braces.
Fix things.
Fix glasses.
It's a multi-tool.
I was gonna
Okay.
Fix my tripod.
To break
It's so many different
and
ways.
unlock the lock.
Yeah.
Army knife.
Pick a lock.
Okay, lockpick. Now, there's one thing you want to add to this is that if it's a lockpick, it's a little bit like, well, it's sort of like you got a key here, and the lockpick would be that, or like a reset button on the old computers.
Yep, I've done that.
A tool of some kind. Lockpick. Now, with the Christmas ornaments, we probably ought to have had a tree here. So you want to get as graphic as you can, and let's put some ornaments on there and a little star at the
And
top.
teeth for the braces.
Teeth. Okay, so what about the teeth?
Just put teeth, because if you have braces, you have teeth.
Teeth. Okay, now we got a whole other subject we could go off on.
Right, you can clean your teeth.
Yeah.
Toothpick.
A toothpick.
Floss.
It's a
Yeah.
paper clip.
Oh.
All right. Floss, huh? Okay.
How about when they get stuck in the vacuum when you're vacuuming?
Okay, vacuum. So they could be a problem.
Or a solution.
So you need a vacuum upright.
Children could swallow them.
Okay, swallow them.
The vacuum can get them, so could kids.
Yeah.
Pets.
Pets,
Anybody get the Sedona connection with this? I got it like a vortex.
the vortex. Actually, I thought of spiral the moment you put it up there.
Spiral. Yeah.
You said it was a clip, and I went, no, it's a spiral.
And it could be a tornado.
I thought of hypnosis, because, you know, back in the day when they used to draw the circle and, you know, cartoons and everything.
Naruto.
Okay, hypnotic wheel.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
put them on the planes that you made out of paper, so you'd have weight, so you could toss them across
Okay,
the room.
yeah.
If you
So kind
So
of
weight-
like
Counterweight.
toys, games.
Or balance for
If you
weight.
put little eyes on it, it'd be a happy face too.
Parachute guys.
Happy face. Okay, we're getting a list here. It's a good one.
Speaking of toys.
So
Planes.
here's the thing: if this were a college course, and you were in the course, and the professor started speaking, and you were going to write this all out in a linear kind of way, starting with page 1, and you start on the left hand and you go across to the right, your character turning down to the next line, and you do it that way to the bottom, then you go to page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. You probably have at least that much information just on this page. The more graphical input, the more color I put to it, the more that you can glob onto that information because it fits with the way your brain and nervous system work better than that linear way of doing it. And I don't know about you, if I wrote all that stuff down, it was good because I encoded it in some way, shape, or form, but the chances of me going back and actually finding the information were never very good. So, because it could have been anywhere in all those pages. With this, I could still go to another page, but I've got 3, 4, or 5 pages right here, and it's graphically oriented so that my brain easily recognizes it. I can get the whole concept all at once, and it's organized in keywords, basically. So what is the usefulness of a keyword? The whole internet is based on it, the whole search engine thing. It's a trigger that brings up other associations, and you think about the whole brain and nervous system literally do work based on what we get associated with something else. So if you Googled NLP and Phoenix, what are you going to come up with? I hope.
We can check that.
NLP skills. So you begin to think about, well, what if I were to begin to take notes in this course in mind maps? Truth is, when I got this concept, you know, Tony Buzan is considered to be the father of mind mapping. The first 30 pages of the book, you can change your, using both sides of your brain. Tony Buzan, B-U-Z-A-N, is an excellent treatise on accelerated learning. And this idea, I've got some ideas where it may have come from even before he got it, and this graphical way of understanding things is really important. So I'm going to encourage you, I recommend that you get colored pens. Like get yourself a little set or one of those pens that switches colors as you go around. I notice that if I'm writing, sometimes I'm writing really fast, I don't have to get particularly one color represents a category, although that would be a really cool concept if you can do it. I just kind of switch colors as I go, and it still makes the graphic representation there. Again, the more graphics you put with it, the more the brain will catch it and encode it better. So the more you can do that. There was, I went to a seminar, an NLP seminar that had memory art. And they graphed out the whole training in these really cool, cartoonish looking mind maps. And it was a really great learning tool because I could go back and get the whole topic. So make your own. Get in the habit of doing this. When I go to business meetings now, I had a partner who, every time we had a business meeting, she would bring me a pad and say, mind map that idea. And we would mind map the meetings. We would mind map projects. It was really a great way to do it, and I probably still wouldn't have done it except that every time she would bring me these papers and say, do it this way. And I started doing it. So I got in the habit of it. So when I went back to college, it's one of the main tools I used to get on the dean's list, because I'd never been on a dean's list before. But I went back to college after 20 years, and I'd also been doing some accelerated learning workshops and done some teacher in-services with school systems. And I thought, well, maybe I should use some of this. So I did. Some of it worked excellently, the stuff I'd been teaching from all the books. Some of it didn't really work for me personally as well. But doesn't mean it wouldn't work for you or somebody else. It just means find the stuff that works for you. In the beginning, though, you got to experiment. Try some new things with this. So mind mapping is the first one. And we'll check back with you as we go. We've got a little habit in place. So who wants to read the first paragraph of mind mapping page?
Mind mapping is a paper and pencil tool that stimulates whole brain thinking and creativity. It is used to plan, to organize ideas and tasks, to improve memory, to problem solve, to find solutions, to enhance creativity, to make decisions, to retrieve all your ideas on a subject and understand oneself, to mention a few.
All right. You want to get one?
It is used both individually to brainstorm with oneself and in a group situation to keep people focused and to consolidate group thought.
All right, we'll get one more.
Okay. Mind mapping is your right brain equivalent to
Outlining,
which is primarily a left brain activity. See the table that contrasts right and left brain function. Whole brain thinking is a major characteristic of peak performers in every field. It is the byproduct of learning to use both sides of your brain.
Okay, and
I
that gives.
have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Being ambidextrous, people are always talking right and left. I don't, in my mind, I feel like
Doesn't
it
particularly
doesn't
fit.
really, because I'm always using both sides.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what side's gonna take over at what moment, it just happens.
Had a roommate who had trouble opening doors from time to time. I mean, he couldn't decide which to do it with, the right or the left side, so he'd be like hitting himself in the head sometimes.
Kinda, yeah, I mean, that's, but, you know, there are certain things I do all
Yeah.
the time with my left, And then there's certain things that when I'm tired, I'll find that my right side takes over.
Yeah,
And then there's certain things that my right side always does.
in most tasks, once you get going on one side or the other, doesn't that one stay dominant for a little while?
It
Not
depends,
necessarily.
like I can float back and forth if I'm running out of time and I
Yeah.
really want to work,
Okay. Well, that's really
be a
great.
little more,
We are bilateral organisms, and there's a lot of examples of dominance one way or the other. When you do have you done the little exercise with the eye to find which one, you still have the same? It's hard to distinguish?
Yeah, but it changes.
Okay, good.
So,
So that's really cool, and there is a big argument that goes away from the concept of right and left brain functioning, although it's a model that works for most people. So really it's not that the right side of your brain is doing something or the left side, because there's lots of different brain structures that get involved in things. It just seems to be more one side than the other as a generalization. So for you, you just have to adapt. Sort of like being dyslexic in a way.
kind of, yeah.
People who are dyslexic, my roommate was also dyslexic, so he had to teach himself to read because the teachers had no clue in those days about how to teach a kid who was dyslexic. So he had to totally find another way of doing it. So play with, experiment. You get another chance to kind of re-examine, well, what else are the uses of being ambidextrous?
And what's cool is when you learn something for the first time, you allow yourself to see how it feels in both hands.
In both hands.
And then after you learn it a couple of times, you start to adapt to that one hand. But
Yeah.
there's like that moment of question where you're not sure which hand is going to be better at doing it. So you experiment.
Sounds like you've mastered it pretty well. I know lots of people who have real difficulty with it. So as people who are not ambidextrous one way or another, what would be the usefulness of that? Is that something you'd want to pick to model from somebody? And I wonder what would happen in your brain and nervous system if you started taking it on, trying it out the way she does it. Well, try it this way, try it that way. Whatever it is, something would start to change in the way your processing works.
When I first started writing in school, I think I started with my left hand, but then switch over to the
You
right.
got taught to go the other way.
So,
Yeah.
so I kind of do the same thing. I'm kind of back and forth, but I'm not writing with my left anymore. I haven't done that in a long time, but I'll do other things with my left, like while the right's writing, I'll do other things with my left.
So you're an example of someone who's actually been sort of forced to take it on to develop the other way. Do you think it's useful to be able to go both ways?
Well, it's, I feel like the left brain, right brain, sometimes logical or sometimes like creative, like looking, like also like when I'm thinking, sometimes I look this way or that way and I don't know if it's logical, creative, I don't know.
I remember breaking a bone in my hand in high school and wearing a cast for a while, and there were a bunch of things that really were off. Because it would have been worse if it was the right hand, but even with the left hand, there were functions I would normally do with the left hand that I couldn't do that way anymore. So I had to learn to shift and change and do it a different way. So there's something about plasticity in the brain and nervous system. You've heard that term? The whole idea of plasticity, we used to think that brain cells were pretty much static, that once they were set, there was only a certain number of them and you were kind of stuck with the way they were. At this point, we are pretty clear that brain structure, brain size, the way it's all put together is changing, shifting on a day-by-day basis. We learn, we shift, we focus on something, that even the size and the configuration inside the brain changes. And it's now known that it's that much. Also, lots of brain cells do regenerate. And we didn't know that before. So new ideas about how things are working is one of the things we want to play with a lot, especially for accelerated learning. So here's the other thing about why mind mapping. When you begin to do this, you begin to use these skills more often, it's literally going to rewire, remap your brain and nervous system and give you new capabilities, new choices that you were not getting access to before. So a pathway through the brain and nervous system. Do you know what happens at the neurological neuron level? This is kind of probably a bad description or view of what happens with neuronal cells, but it's probably not too far off either. If the body of the neuron is here, where the next neuron is, and the little dendrites, they're called, come close together, and if a pathway of electricity or energy or information comes down and follows that pathway now, literally a little calcium bond forms right there called a dendritic connection. Now that's a pretty interesting piece of information to file away for yourself. From those little dendritic connections, now this pathway is much more likely to fire again than it was before. But I don't know, anybody else here hike a lot? Do you stay on the trails? I don't. I love to bushwhack, and I'll be on a trail that is just a rabbit trail. You know what happens to rabbit trails? They're this big. They go under trees. So I'm following a trail and it doesn't go anywhere. It sort of ends, but if I find another trail, I can follow it. But if I can shift from this one to this one to this one, and I did it 30 times, now there's a pathway that's getting stronger and stronger. It's become a real trail then. Somebody else will come along and follow that same trail, and pretty soon that gets wider. In our country, there were animals, there were people came along, there were, especially in Native American areas of the country, and then the white folks came from the east, and they came in horses. Pretty soon they were not just walking where they went, they were bringing the wagons and the horses, and it became a much bigger trail and had ruts in it, and pretty soon we followed the same trails, basically, that had been used for thousands of years, in some cases, to create highways and freeways, interstate system that we have now. And by and large, they've used the same pathways. So it's kind of like that in your brain and nervous system. We have a network of neurological connections where you have a behavior that where the pathway used to go some other way, and you've created this dendritic connection. Instead of going A, B, C, you now go A, B, D, because a different connection happened than the one that was there before. So the more times you go that way, obviously the stronger the new pathway gets. What happens to the old one?
Falls away.
It falls away. It's like any muscle that you haven't used, it's going to atrophy. Literally will lose connection after a little while. So you think about what it's like to be depressed. As you do, what is it that people who are depressed are doing to create depression?
They're continuing in it. They're
Okay.
continuing in the patterns. Maybe they're sleeping more. Maybe they have the same thought
They
going
may
on.
sleep, and this is a pretty common thing. There's a specific way they're thinking that goes over and over again. More specifically, what are they doing with their body and with their mind talk and voice?
They're withdrawing.
Withdrawing. So what does withdrawing look like?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Now look, what's she doing with her shoulders?
They're just slumping.
Yeah, you slump.
Their eyes are
they roll
down.
forward. Head tends to go down, typically to one side. Where do your eyes go?
Down.
Okay, try this for a minute and notice what the sound is like in your voice. Anybody got a little whiny voice?
I said, oh, poor me.
Oh, poor me. It could be monotony or whiny or something like that.
Feel very
Now,
victimized.
automatic. Now you got this whole language coming up describing the whole thing. Don't stay there very long. Move your body around. So they did this study, and they found out that, and I don't know for sure who did this study. It could be an urban myth or an NLP myth. But the story of it is like this, and it's demonstrable, so you can do it. They took clinically depressed people, rolled them out in wheelchairs in this setting, and as I understand it, there was somebody who was kind of a cheerleader to keep them up and moving and all of that. But they did two main things. Now you notice what it felt like in your body to do this? and hear that sound? Where'd you feel that in your body?
The stomach.
Stomach? Shoulders?
Neck.
Heart, yeah. A lot of people will get it right in here through the midsection, and it's especially the gut feeling and all of that. Now, back out of it again. Here's the two things they did. So keep your head more or less level, so your eyes then roll up where your head stays, but your eyes roll up as high as you can get them and find a spot to focus on the ceiling. As you focus on that spot, focus, keep focusing, and then put a big grin on your face. Big smile, silly grin, bigger and bigger and bigger, and keep focusing, and try to be depressed while you're doing it. Can you do that? No, you can't do that. Come on back down again. So the mind-body connection is really important, and you just created new pathways through your brain and nervous system. We actually got an ABC pathway going in you, and then immediately shifted it to an ABD pattern, and now you have a different experience of it. So the more times you do that, the stronger the new pathway gets. And again, if they could get people to keep in this physiology, eyes up, big smile for like 20 minutes at a time, it would literally break the depressive cycle and the neurochemical connections that are there. The chemistry begins to change, because that's the problem with creating that kind of state in your life, is it becomes basically addictive. You get stuck in it, you can't get out easily, and now you have to do something much more dramatic to get yourself out.
Would you say that might be some connection in spirituality-wise? Because looking, a state of bliss and looking up to God.
Yeah,
I mean, there must be a spiritual connection.
Well, isn't that a great metaphor? Where's your higher self?
Right.
Yeah, you're going to be up there to look down at it, from it. So,
When you're in a state of depression, over time, can it become like a state of homeostasis? Like, shouldn't you get stuck in it?
yeah, that's exactly what happens.
The new homeostasis?
Yeah, it becomes the new homeostatic state,
Yeah.
and you have to break it to get to a different one. So we have like set points. We're set up to keep things the way they have been, in general. And you think, well, from a point of view of evolution, that's been a pretty good thing, because we get to a point where we don't have to now have a lot of conscious attention on things. They happen automatically for us. So we learn something, and we keep doing the same thing over and over again, even if it doesn't work anymore. Even if it didn't work the first time, sometimes we keep doing it. Because we learn very quickly, very easily. So you're learning all the time. Some things that you learn are useful, and some are not. So
They're saying if we continuously practice mind mapping, we're creating neurons in our brain that will facilitate creative thinking, which is depth, breadth, ways of looking at things. So it's homeostasis is a different way.
it's homeostasis is a different way.
And
Get
so
to a different set point.
And so then that becomes part of the way we're.
It becomes part of the way that you are.
Okay.
And so it's about how we get things. All learning is a process of getting things connected. So what gets associated inside your brain and nervous system. So some of the things you have associated aren't really working for you, and some of them are. So you want to break the old associations that are unresourceful and begin to create the ones that are most useful to you. So it's a process. All change is really a process of that. Break the old pattern, create a new one. And we get to choose which pattern we put in. How valuable would that be?